What's good, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Fans First Sports Network's Power 2 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jordan, and I'm here with Wesley. How you doing?
Doing good, man.
Another day?
Another day, another week. We had some good matchups and some good games to be excited about. So can't hate on that. A few surprises and maybe some other ones that we actually predicted.
Yeah, for sure. It was to be a Big Ten and SEC leaning podcast because on the Power 2 podcast, we do talk about everyone. It was not a great week to be a Big Ten and SEC leaning podcast because there were some upsets, and it was some like one. It was like, okay, if you've been paying attention, you kind of saw that one coming.
Yep.
But then the other ones are like, what are we doing here? Uh, I guess we should start with the big one, sort of. This is, if you were paying attention, you saw it coming. A lot of people clearly weren't paying attention. Texas beats Bama. I think the most interesting thing about this game is that Texas didn't look good, right? So
No.
I want, in my opinion, I was going to say, in my opinion, I want to ask your opinion. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I want to ask your opinion. Did you watch that game and think like, oh yeah, this is a playoff team. Like this is a team. This is a contender.
Neither one of these teams looked very good.
No, and I'm watching it. And it reminded me, like, I'm not trying to open, wounds, but it reminded me of Florida State LSU because Florida State eventually dominated that game and they looked really good. And it's like, oh, like this is a complete team, offense, defense. They have, a quarterback that can make things happen. They have a good wide receiver. And I'm watching Texas, and all I'm seeing is like they just left points on the board. They just left points on the board. I'm like, man, a good team like LSU, even because I still think LSU is a good team. They're gonna destroy Bama. Like this is a bad Bama team, worse than even a lot of us expected because of the quarterback. I mean, if you want to call him that, the guy who stands and catches the snap. But it's just it was bad. I'm watching Texas, and I'm like, they're doing some cool things. They're protecting whatever, but it really felt like the game should have been a blowout from jump. And what was it? The third or fourth quarter, maybe Alabama was down 2 or 3.
Yep.
Texas ends up pulling away, but it's like, and I'm watching the game and I'm thinking like, okay, so this is going to be every Alabama game where they struggle, where they still find like it's going to be last year's Texas game without Quinn Ewers getting injured. Someone is going to pull something out the hat and Alabama's going to win and they're going to breathe a deep sigh of relief and everyone's going to be like, Nick Saban's the greatest. And that didn't happen because this Bama team isn't as good. I mean, they don't have a quarterback. They don't have any wide receivers of note. Their running backs are iffy. And
I'm not sure if their
Justice
offensive
Haynes,
line is that good, and that's where I kind of thought. I mean, that's the one thing you kind of thought was still going to at least hold true was their offensive line was just going to be dominant, and that's just not the case this year.
Yeah, which is really weird because the outside they're younger. The left tackle is a freshman. The right tackle is not a freshman, but he's still younger, I think, in JC Latham. But the interior isn't young. They should have some experience, and they were awful.
Yeah, and this like you said, it really felt like one of those games. So at the end of the third quarter, if I just watched the game, I'd have told you that Texas is winning by 15 points. They're losing 16-13 at the end of the third quarter. And so I thought the same as you. I was like, this is going to stay close and do this, and Texas is going to screw around. And then Alabama's going to have some 60-yard touchdown or ridiculous interception at the end, or just something was going to go their way to for them to pull it out and then, maybe correct. But I also didn't know if I saw that because, again, neither team looked good. But Alabama played so bad that I just couldn't believe Texas wasn't winning by more.
Right.
And I don't want to say like it wasn't one of those games where it was like, oh, well, each team made good plays that made the other team look bad. No, each team played bad.
Yeah, they
looked bad. It was
like you can tell the people who just like stat watched and they see like Quinn Ewers had 300 yards. And like, oh my God, he had such a great game. And I'm like, and especially as an Ohio State fan, because Quinn was on campus for like 30 seconds, everyone's like, oh my God, Quinn Ewers looks so good. He should be our starting quarterback. And I've literally had to tell people multiple times, I'm like, I need you to understand something. If Kyle McCord this season had the full season that Quinn Ewers had last year, you would pack up his bags, ban him from campus, and walk him to the bus station yourself. 2,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's not acceptable at Ohio State. And everyone forgets that because he beats Bama. And then it's like, oh, he's so much better. And who knows? Maybe he'll be better. But I would bet my money that McCord has a better first year, even if this is McCord's first, this is his second year. Ewers has a better year. That's beside the point. But the point is, if Ewers was what he was thought to be, he might have been able to put 500 yards up against them. Like,
he had nearly half of his yards on 4 passes. He had 164 yards on 4 passes. And so again, that's against Bama, who doesn't normally give up those big passes. So again,
but they had no pass rush. He was just sitting back there and just.
And again, like you said, there's ways to stat watch and throw Ewers into the Heisman watch or something like that. But watching the game, it didn't look like that from either one of them. Now, I'm not sure what going forward. It's still early in the season. Not sure what either of the teams can fix. I think I'd probably believe in Texas turning into a top 5 team, possibly. I don't believe in it, but it could happen before Alabama. I think Alabama might lose 4 games this year.
Yeah, they're
like this is not a good team, and it's not like that. I can't tell you what they're best at. At least normally in the past, I'd be like, yeah, this may struggle, but they're gonna do this. I don't know what they're gonna do this year.
I mean, I think their best, and this is going to sound weird, what we were just saying about Quinn. I think their best thing is their secondary. But as we saw in this game, their secondary is boom or bust, right? The corner, I think his name was Mitchell. No, that's the wide receiver. I can't think of his Arnold. I think his name was Arnold. Literally, he made a crazy play, tackle for a loss, was great. And then the very next play, he either gave up a touchdown or had like a penalty of sorts. Yeah. It was so up and down. Caleb Downs had plays, and he's a freshman too. But again, that's the thing. Alabama
can only cover for so long, though. Even an elite cornerback, there's only so long you can cover somebody for.
Right. And so, like, Caleb Downs would have a great play, and then the next play he would make a stupid mistake. That's fine. He's a freshman. So it's like their most potential, I do think, is their secondary, especially because they have Kool-Aid McKinstry, who is a top 10 pick probably if he continues to play well. Like, he's a really good corner. But at the same time, that is their best, but it's so boom or bust because it's hard to say they had a good game, but all 3 of them made really good plays at times. And so if they grow, the secondary can help. But like you said, you can only hold up for so long. So even if you have a great game for 3 quarters, it only takes 2 deep passes if Jalen Milroe can't score, if your wide receivers can't get open or can't catch the ball. So I watched the game and I thought, Bama, this is a 3-4 loss team. And I thought Texas was still a 2-loss team. I think Texas loses to like a Kansas State or an Oklahoma or something, and then they lose a game, as Texas always does, to Iowa State. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose to Wyoming this week because they felt too good about themselves.
Well, and like you said, you can look at stats and go, oh, Caleb Downs, a cornerback, had 10 tackles. That's a great game. Your cornerback shouldn't lead your team in tackles.
Yeah.
That means you're giving up a lot of catches when your cornerback is making that many tackles.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it was to be expected. And the last thing I have to say about Bama is, like, I get the Nick Saban hype. It's not even hype. He's the GOAT, right?
He's earned it.
But when you can tell Bama was going downhill when they were struggling to get offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, and they go and hire Tommy Rees, who is awful. He is not good. Like, I get it. He's the hot name. it's the thing that happens all the time with like former players where it's like, he's young, he's attractive, people like him, so they think he's a good coach. And it's like, no. He's just young and attractive and played quarterback at Notre Dame. Like, he's not good. Like, this has happened with so many people. Like, it's how the one dude got the Arizona Cardinals job. It was awful. He was young and attractive. And people are like, oh my God, he's such a good coach. And it's like, no. You just, like, he's just not, like, not to be mean, he's just not like 50 and overweight. Like, you just, like, you wanted him to be on your sidelines, like, whatever. So it's just like, he's not good. And then they go and get Kevin Steele, who has been bad at his last 3 or 4 jobs. Like, he may have been good 10, 15 years ago, but he's been bad at Miami. He was bad at Auburn last year. And I don't remember the stop before that, but he was bad there too. So it's like, you don't have a quarterback. You don't have wide receivers. You haven't had a running back in a couple of years since Najee, because your running back last year was a senior and you've never started a senior running back. And you have a bad offensive defensive coordinator, and you lost Will Anderson and you lost Bryce Young. And it was like, it was going to be a bad year. There was no way it wasn't, but this is kind of embarrassing because if Texas was a good team, they could have won by 3 scores,
Should have,
17 points, 21, something like that. So Bama better figure it out. But Nick Saban, if you hear this, you don't have to do this no more, bro. You got grandkids. Go hang out with Miss Terry. Like, what are you doing it for? Like, what's up? Like,
should go
go have a
coach the
life.
Chargers.
No, retire. Like, do your grandkids know you? Like, I know your kids don't know you. No disrespect. They just don't. I've been around football programs. I know your kids don't know you. Do your grandkids? Like, you got a chance, man. Like, are you doing this to go 9-3? It's not worth it. Miami beats A&M, which is like shocking, but also it's shocking because Miami is just worse A&M. Like, overhyped, has some recruiting, has a coach that people like, although obviously Jimbo is more successful. He has a national championship and like has a hottest name on the market, is doing some things in recruiting and NIL, but like Miami is just worse A&M. And so for Miami to beat A&M like this, it's like I didn't expect either of them to be good, but like last year A&M beat Miami and they both went 5-7. I could see that again, but I kind of expected this to be a game that, like, when you've recruited 10 4 and 5-star defensive linemen, you should be able to dominate the trenches. And when, Miami's quarterback has shown himself to be skittish, you should be able to get pressure. And Tyler Van Dyke looked like he did 2 years ago, which I guess maybe his freshman year, when everyone thought he was going to be a first-round pick, because A&M with a million 4 and 5-star defensive tackles couldn't do anything. And it's just like, you really gave that man $100 million contract, huh? Like, you really made it to where you could never fire him. And this is the product that you're getting.
Yeah, and I mean, and also just A&M, I'm not sure it makes any sense. Like this, so this game again was close until the fourth quarter. You look at it's a 15-point win eventually for Miami, but it was close all the way to the fourth quarter. A&M threw the ball 53 times and rushed the ball 29 times. Now, and out of the 29 rushes, 5 of them were the quarterback. So I'm not sure what they were doing of just committing to throwing so much. But Wegman clearly wasn't going to let that pay off for them. I didn't think it kind of looked like it. Yeah,
but
I'm
everyone
not sure.
was so like hyped about him. Like he was also going to be the next guy.
Well, I mean, we talked about this last week. I think we both mentioned or both agreed with, but I mentioned that I did not agree with A&M jumping in the top 25 after their week 1 win. I didn't think that there was any reason thinking they did belong in the top 25. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Miami going forward, because they are going to have to play North Carolina and Florida State this year.
They just beat a bad A&M team.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the case. But what is going to be cool is Miami should be able to win their next few games to hype that North Carolina game. It's good. I think that game's going to be super hyped. They might both be top 15 teams going into that game. So that one could be a lot of fun. And then North Carolina probably just completely obliterates them. But this is a bad A&M team. And it's weird to sit there and say like they do have a coaching staff, and they've over the past few years been one of the top recruiting teams in the country for 3 or 4 years in a row, and they're just a bad football team.
That's hilarious. You are so right. Miami is going to be 5-0 going into that game.
The Miami North Carolina game, they're both going to be top 15, and it's going to be hyped as the big game.
Oh man, that's going to be
it's going to be beautiful. Yeah, because they're not losing to Bethune or Temple or Georgia Tech.
No,
they'll be good enough to beat them.
And Minnesota's and UNC is going to get a fake win over Minnesota, who we know is not good this year, but they're going to get a fake win over them. Man, yeah, they're both going to be top 15 teams. If any more crazy upsets happen, someone could sneak into like number 10 or something.
Yeah, like
this is going to get like college game
like number
day.
9 versus number 13 by then.
Yeah, this is going to get like college game day or something like that,
and probably going to be a slaughter.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. So yeah, it's just the SEC is in a weird place right now. They're 3-6 right now, which is like this happens to mere mortals, but this has never happened to the SEC. And this is furthering my take that like the SEC is not this like overly dominant conference as a whole. They just have all of the national championships, which is very, very important. But like when I project out the next 10 years after Saban retires and isn't no longer a dynasty, I think it's more of a 5-5, 6-4 split between some of these other conferences, or maybe the Big Ten and SEC get 9 out of 10, and then ACC gets 1 or something. I don't think it's going to be as dominant as it has been, because I think with the transfer portal, with quarterbacks, with different things like that, it's starting to slightly get more parity. And I don't mean parity throughout the entire sport. I mean parity between like the top 10 teams. It's not just 2 SEC teams and everyone else. I mean, there's never been parity outside of 5 to 10 teams. I don't think it's ever going to be. But I think we could get to the point where the SEC has a rotating cast of 4 or 5 teams that can win a national championship like they always do. You have Bama, you have Georgia, you have LSU every couple of years. You have who else has won national champions for them? It feels like it's those the only 3 for a while. But at least you have those 3 that come up every couple of years. And then you have Ohio State. I don't know that Michigan gets there under Harbaugh, but you get Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State maybe, although I don't know if they get there under James Franklin. And you add in the Oregon, Washington, USC, and you get this cast of like every year. I think it balances out eventually when you don't have Nick Saban winning like 6 in the last 10 years.
Yeah,
But
I don't see that return to greatness coming. And it's seeming like, and don't get me wrong, they're still having great recruiting classes, but it's not like it used to be. They're not pulling as many of the 5 stars and the big guys, just everybody they want like they did for a couple of years. And I don't know if that's the stuff changing there. There's only so much NIL money to go around at each school, so people are going to have better chances. But also, I mean, maybe just what he's selling is getting old now, and maybe people are tired of it. There's only so long that it's exciting to be part of that. And again, they haven't won in a few years, so.
And and I think the ultimate thing, which we'll see how it plays out, because I think the Pac-12 like butchers itself again. There's more wealth. There's more wealth with quarterbacks, and anyone can find a good quarterback, and they don't have to be the number 1 recruit, because all of these quarterbacks have.
Why didn't Alabama find one?
Good question. They've had them.
To be fair, they've hit so many times in a row.
It's like they were bound.
They were due to have this. I mean,
and
with Tua and Hurts and just, I mean, everything, and everything they've done over and over again, it was time for them to miss.
And they may still have one on their roster. He's just young, because they did get 2 guys. Although I didn't find either of them very impressive. They did get 2 freshmen, and it may be fair that they're not ready yet, but that one of them could be the guy next year. It could be relatively a 1-year blank, because I do still think there's some other issues that they're not just going to fix immediately.
The problem with transfers and the way it is now is what's going to happen, or I hope and predict, one of them is going to get cast in too early this year before he's ready, which is going to hurt his development, and the other one's going to transfer out because the other guy got a shot first. Which would be perfect, because I'm all about Alabama just losing everything and falling apart. So
yeah, for sure. So it'll be definitely something to watch, and we'll have it covered here on the Power 2 podcast, because that's what we talk about, the Power 2. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into some Big Ten updates, and then we're going to finish the show like always. We're going to do our AP rankings. We're going to struggle to get through a watch list, and I have a decent list of games, but they all have a story behind them, and it has nothing to do with the game actually being interesting.
You've got to care.
There's not a single interesting game this week, really. And then we'll get out of here. So yeah, we'll be right back. What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the Power 2 podcast, a Fans First Sports Network podcast. Hopefully you all are enjoying the new college football feed. Hopefully we're not the only show that you're listening. The NFL feed does crazy numbers. So the goal and the hope is that eventually we reach that. It takes some time. I don't know how long the NFL feed's been around, but it's been around a lot longer. But we need you all to tell people about it and tell people that you're going to get all the shows that you want, just like you have with the NFL feed. So getting into the Big Ten, We'll start with the games. We'll end with the scandal, and I don't want to talk about that too much because I've already talked about that on my Big Ten specific show, and it almost talking about it almost ruined the show. Like it was awful. So, Wisconsin loses to Wazoo. Um, I don't know, man. I feel like this is what happens when you hire Phil Longo. Last week they ran for like 198 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns amongst the two running backs, and everyone was like, "See, Phil Longo does run the ball." And the thing is, he does run the ball, but he only runs the ball when it works. He has no commitment to it, right? He had the year with Javonte Williams and the other guy who's also in the NFL where they both rushed for 1,000 yards, and it worked. So he did it. But as soon as it doesn't work, he goes back to his bread and butter, which is not running the ball and which is forcing quarterbacks to try to win for him. And, you know, I just don't think that Tanner Mordecai is that guy. Like, he's not awful, right? But he's not the guy that you want or that you should believe is going to just win a game for you, especially when a team is relatively outplaying you. And I just thought that this was kind of gross. Tanner Mordecai threw the ball 40 times. Their starting running backs, their starting running backs ran the ball a total of 19 times. You had a legitimate, because I think their backup running back is ass, but you have a legitimate NFL running back, and he runs the ball 7 times, and your starting quarterback, who is not a running quarterback, runs the ball 7 times. Like, where does that make sense?
Well, on the other side, I mean, does Washington State have something that we didn't see coming? I mean, is there a team here that's going to go and surprise a few people? I mean, again, they've started off with I mean, Colorado State before beating Wisconsin, but I mean, after North Colorado, they're turning around to get Oregon State and then UCLA, and then followed by Arizona and Oregon. So I don't know. Like, I mean, is there more here to Washington State, or are we not giving them some credit? Is there possibly a team here that can wreck some dreams in the Pac-12, or is this just a bad Wisconsin team with a bad game plan?
See, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I can't say that Washington State was super impressive to me. Obviously, they did win, but also I think that they're more competent and that they could surprise some people like they did Wisconsin. But I think the surprise, if this makes any sense, would be like the Wisconsin level teams where like Wisconsin may not be awful this year. And the way the Big Ten West is, they may still win it, but I wouldn't give Wazoo a chance against like Oregon, Michigan, like Michigan, Washington, those ones. Maybe UCLA. But the thing is, Wazoo won this game last year and didn't go on to have an amazing year. So I think they're probably better than we think, but not like, oh, does this mean that they're going to be in the Pac-12 race better?
So far, the thing that I see with Mordecai is that he just looks like a guy that's gonna not make the bad play. And those, I mean, some times when nothing was there, he threw the ball away or he tucked and run, which he wasn't getting many yards when he did tuck and run. But he wasn't throwing interceptions. And I mean, he did throw for 451 yards in week 1. And then just didn't make mistakes against Wisconsin. And again, I think didn't Wisconsin lose the turnover battle 3-0? So
Yeah,
I mean, that ends up
they
having a lot to do with this. But so far, Mordecai doesn't look the guy. Like, even when he's got pressure, he's not making the bad decision. He's okay with just with taking the nothing play, which he's going to need to do against some of these other teams.
Yeah, and that's what Mordecai was basically at SMU, and I
Right.
think that's why Wisconsin gets him as a transfer to be the starting quarterback, especially when their quarterback last year was Graham Mertz, who does not make that play and does turn the ball over. So I get it, but when you say, and I think you're 100% right, but when you know that's the quarterback that you have, why would you also ask him
to do too
throw
much?
40 times?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 40 was a lot for him.
They lose by 9. They lose the turnover battle by 3. So they're still in this game for most of the game, right? And you just give up on running the ball? Are you telling me that you couldn't have run the ball, ran out the clock, and it finally clicked? Like, I've watched them with Braylon Allen run the ball to death, and it finally clicks. Michigan does it all the time.
Right,
Like
right.
Michigan did it last year against Ohio State. Michigan's running game was awful in the first half. It was awful. Ohio State looked amazing in the first half, and then it broke. And when it broke, the dam broke. You have to commit to it when that is your best thing, and he just gave up on it. And
Yeah,
then
you
this
can't
is
do
what
that.
happened.
Wisconsin needs to run the ball.
It's
Like,
no
come
matter,
on,
and it just
come on.
yeah. So I think that this is going to be a slightly rougher year for Wisconsin than we thought.
Do you think they learned anything from this? Can they rebound because they're like, oh crap, this was this their lesson they needed to learn?
I would say I'm gonna say no, only because this is just Phil Longo. Right, like I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out next week, whoever they play, and runs the ball 40 times.
Sure.
I just think that as soon as he gets in trouble again, he's going to stop running. And so when he plays Illinois, that's going to have that's going to be hard to run against because of their defensive line. When they play Ohio State, that's going to be hard to run against. When they play any team with a pulse, they're just going to sit. I think they're going to do this because if you're doing this against Wazoo, what are you going to do against teams that are actually talented?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say no because I think that it's going to look like it. And then as soon as they get punched in the mouth again, he's going to run scared and stop running the ball, despite the fact that he has like a legitimate stud on his team. And I don't like Chez Mellusi that much, but he is a still quality backup, right? Like I think he is a good running back. I just don't think he's exceptional.
So just with the Big Ten, with your big boys, with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, like they all played AAA teams, maybe AA teams this week. Did you see anything from any of them that that we should read into, considering who they were playing, whether that's good or bad? Do we say, hey man, they should have beat them by 100 instead of what they did, or I mean, they just all handled business like they were supposed to, and we learned nothing?
Yeah, so I think with Ohio State, we learned that Kyle McCord's the starting quarterback. He was announced the starting quarterback today. A lot of people expected it, except for Buckeye fans who are listening to a disgraced coach who supposedly has sources. All of the sarcasm.
Yep.
So I think that's important because he gets a full week in practice and games to prepare for Notre Dame, and he's going to need that. I think that he showed some ability, and that week one was just kind of nervous energy and just like a bad play call. Sure. I think we're going to learn more about the defense this week, but Ohio State in 2 games has allowed 10 points total, and every single team last year scored 10 points on Ohio State except Northwestern, which is 1, Northwestern, and 2, it was a freaking monsoon. So their defense looks better.
Western Kentucky has 93 points in 2 games. Now,
so
I mean,
that's going to test it.
They're playing South Florida and Houston Christian, but still, that's some points.
But Western Kentucky is a team last year that Ohio State would beat 45-24. And nobody would feel good about it.
And nobody's going to be happy if that's what happens.
So I think we've learned some things, but you still kind of see Penn State. Penn State was weird. They scored 63 points, ran the ball 60 times. But like, no, it was just like it was so dominant you didn't learn anything. I think their highest carry was 19 carries. He had like 19 for 100 yards, which was pretty solid. And then everyone else was like 5 carries, 6 carries, 3 carries. Both quarterbacks had a rushing touchdown. Their other running back had 3 touchdowns. And I think Penn State's in this awkward spot because I don't think this is a negative, right? But I think they're in this awkward spot where they have 2 good running backs and they don't want to transfer because one is better than the other. And Nick Singleton's better than Kaytron Allen. But Kaytron Allen got the start. He got all of the carries, most of the carries, but Nick Singleton's the one that had 3 touchdowns. He had like 12 carries for like 41 yards. It wasn't great. I didn't get to watch the full game, but you could tell he was being used in the red zone. But it's like Nick Singleton is better, but I think they're doing these things to kind of acquiesce to Kaytron because they don't want him to transfer either, which I get.
Right.
It's hard to balance all these good running backs. So I don't think I learned anything, but that's something I'm going to be paying attention to. Like who's getting the carries if the game is close? So like it's easy to give, him the start against Delaware, but how do you balance this when you're against Ohio State and Michigan and in these teams? And is there an issue, or were you just like going out of your way to be kind to kind of make everyone happy? Like it's not learning anything, but it was just a thought. It was a question because he's not the better running back, and they made him the starter and they gave him all the carries, and I was like, interesting.
And just one question about Ohio State, just real quick. So, what do you need to see this next week to not be nervous about the Notre Dame game in 2 weeks. And I don't want to misquote you, but I believe you've been sort of dismissive of Notre Dame and what they can do this year. So is there like, and they have not played bad against, they've looked like they were supposed to against the teams they've played. What do you need to see from Ohio State to not be like, oh, I don't know, this is to not be freaking out the next week and a little bit nervous?
So that's a good question, but I don't have an answer because I have no faith in Notre Dame. And
okay,
it's not
so
even that I think Ohio State,
we're going to continue that trend regardless of what happens this week.
Yeah, and it's not even that I think that Ohio State is that good. I just think that Notre Dame has very clear flaws. Like a lot of people do, but very clear flaws that as long as Ryan Day doesn't just like crap his pants, Ohio State shouldn't lose this game. Like everyone's like, oh my God.
Having said that, you have not really been so sure that Ryan Day can't just crap his pants at any point.
Yeah, exactly. But he can't show me that against Western Kentucky.
Sure.
Like he has to do that against Notre Dame. Like I can't learn anything. If they go out and they play the game that they're supposed to, they'll win, in my opinion. Unless Ryan Day craps his pants. But nothing that can happen in Western Kentucky will show me that, especially because I do long term, I will still answer your question. For the long, not Notre Dame, but for the long term, what I need to see in this game is I need to see them limit Western Kentucky. And so what I've said already is Western Kentucky's averaging over 300 yards a game, and their quarterback doesn't have an interception yet. So if I want them to hold him to 100 yards under his average, so that's like between 200 and 230, and at least one interception. Even if he has 2 touchdowns or whatever, if you get hit the first interception of the season and he throws for 200 yards, 225 instead of 300, I'll be happy. Maybe 14 points because I do think they're a pretty solid offense. Like that, but that's
and Ohio State has to cover. They're favored by 28. They need to cover in this game.
Yeah. So
they need to show that.
I think that is kind of what I'm looking for longer term to feel better against, Penn State, Michigan, but Notre Dame, I don't believe in Notre Dame. I don't think that it's Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman's not that good. Their receivers aren't good.
I'm going to go ahead and say you might be being a little too dismissive of Notre Dame from what I've seen. And I know you want them to be bad, but I'm nervous the game in 2 weeks could be closer than what you're comfortable with.
I'm never comfortable with a close game.
No matter what.
I still don't. It's not that I don't think it's going to be a good game. I'm not saying that Ohio State's going to blow them out. I just think that
I don't
Notre Dame can't win the game unless Ryan Day just doesn't show up. He just doesn't show up. And I don't think that he's going to do that. It may not be pretty. He may do exactly what he did last year, which is let them hang around and make everyone mad for 60 minutes, which is really
I know we're talking 2 weeks ahead of time. I just was kind of that's one of the only interesting things I can ask about this next week is what do you need to see to not be nervous about 2 weeks?
Yeah. The last thing that I'll say about Notre Dame, and this is part of the reason I don't think they have a chance. Did you watch the Army game? And if you did, I apologize. Because
I did not watch the Army game.
So you're better than me because I'm a sick man and I did watch it. Army's wide receivers were
which they don't
all game against Notre Dame, and the quarterback just couldn't hit him.
Are you talking about the Navy game?
Did I say Army?
Yes.
Navy. Whichever one they played. Notre Dame versus Navy.
It was 42-3 Notre Dame.
Yeah. So their quarterback who doesn't throw.
No, he can't throw. No, we know that.
But I'm watching the game and I'm like, if this quarterback was good, maybe they don't win, but they put up like 21 points. He had just wide open receivers, and I'm like,
they attempted 7 passes in the game,
and they were open on all of them, like literally open on all of them. And I'm like, all right, well now you have to do that against Marvin Harrison Jr. and now you have to do that against. Emeka Egbuka, and I think your secondary is going to get destroyed. I also think, and we'll get, I guess this is my entire scouting report. I think Ohio State's really good against the run, and Notre Dame's going to try to run the ball, and I don't like their running back that much. So I think this is going to be a game where Sam Hartman has to win the game, and I just don't believe in him. So we'll see. A team because I can be wrong because I was wrong about the Illini. I was right that I picked them to lose to Kansas, but I was higher on them than most, and they have not rewarded my trust so far. Almost losing to Toledo and then losing to Kansas. which again I expected the Kansas loss, but almost losing to Toledo is sick. I think they have a really interesting quarterback, Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss. I think he's better than what they've had. I also think he's young and prone to make mistakes, but this kid has a gear, man. It's weird that it feels like they have to get down like 2 touchdowns for it to happen. But if it's like if they're down a score or two and it's 4th down, that kid's gonna stand in the pocket, put the ball on the money, and convert. He converted a 4th and 16. He converted a 4th and 4 in one game. I think he's converted like 3 big 4th downs in these games to try to give Illinois a chance. One game they win, one game they lose, and so interesting. But they lost to Kansas. Kansas is good. Kansas has an amazing offensive coach who I'm not sure how much longer he'll be at Kansas, but still a loss. Still not great for the brand, losing to Kansas. And it's going to take people like 6 years to realize that Kansas isn't Kansas of old. So just saying they lost
right
is just like that's all. Like that's it.
For
you
sure.
know, the perspective is down immediately.
Which they've earned that.
Yeah, I mean, they have over and over again. So the last Big Ten update, and like I said, I don't want to get into this much because I talked about it before, and it just ruined everything. It's just dumb. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Mel Tucker has been accused of sexual harassment, specifically sexually harassing a previous rape survivor who went to his school and schools across the country to advocate for sexual to advocate against sexual harassment and rape, and to teach athletes to literally, she has a shirt called Set the Expectation, to teach them to not sexually assault and to get consent and things like that. And it's bad enough to sexually harass or rape or anyone, but you do that to the person that's at your school to teach your players not to do that. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. He's probably going to get fired. But as all of these things happen, the school tried to hide it. They acquiesced to him.
That's what's going to end up being the big thing.
Yeah, they didn't suspend him. They put the trial on a bye week. They let him coach all these games. They found out about this in December. The report was done in July, and nothing happened until it hit the news media, because that's what everyone thinks they can get away with it now. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I'll just say, to be fair, Mel Tucker is vehemently denying the claims. And
so he's not denying that it happened. He's denying
that they were in an adult relationship, not that was consensual.
Yeah. I read it. He's lying. That in my expert opinion, which is not an expert opinion, he's lying. It takes too much to get into it right now. If you want to listen to my thoughts on it, it's on this feed. It's the I-80 football show. What he's saying doesn't make sense for it to be anywhere in the realm of true. It doesn't even make sense for it to be like teenagers in this happened.
The good part is that there's going to be text message conversations and all that. I mean, I think that the truth is going to be very evident if either one or both of them, just put their phones into evidence, because it's going to look really obvious if there's messages missing and things that aren't there, and things that are said from both sides versus one side and things like that. I think it.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, the investigation's over. Like, they've already done all the investigating. They've already gotten the phones and the messages and all this other kind of stuff. Literally the only thing that is in contention, because he's admitted to everything else, is if it was consensual or not. He's saying that she initiated phone sex with him, and she's saying that they were having a regular conversation.
And then he started.
And that's the only, because he admitted to doing it. He just said it was fun. And it's
that she wanted him to do it, or she was fine with it.
And again, I could be wrong. I'm not always right, but I read it. None of it sounds true. He's literally, in his thing, he says, it started when she sent me a picture of us together at the spring game.
Well, and then
she sent you a picture of you in public with 50,000 fans, and she's wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and that is what started your sexting.
Also, the other thing he said that I think is screwy and doesn't add up is he said that she encouraged the relationship by accepting gifts from me. No. I mean, that's not that's accepting gifts. That's not
Yeah, that's
encouraging the relationship. Those are. I mean, there's things that don't add up for sure.
yeah.
That
It's weird,
but
and
yes, he's going to lose his job.
yeah, and he was already caught lying because he said it happened while he was at home when there's literally
Yep.
receipts and evidence that it happened in a hotel that
Right.
the university had paid for
right.
while he was on a university sanctioned trip that he used a donor's private airplane to get to.
Let's just
Like,
whenever he gets fired the next week or so, we'll just say
we'll talk about it. Yeah,
see you later, and like we don't need to spend any more time on this. He doesn't deserve it, and the whole
no,
situation's messed up.
it's sad. It's the whole thing is sad. All right, so let's get into the AP really quick, where we get to complain about them getting it wrong again. I want to see who we're going to be right about this week, because as you've already mentioned, we were right about A&M not being in the top 25. I can tell you one team that I know shouldn't be in the top 25, and that's Iowa at 25. Iowa, speaking of 25, Iowa has failed to reach 25 points in 2 games. And if you're not aware, they need to average 25 points across 13 games for their offensive coordinator to keep his job. So the only thing that they've done at 25 this year is get awarded 25 in the AP poll, because they haven't scored 25 points yet in 2 games. So,
well, I'm going to add in another team that we already talked about, and that's Miami, who does not deserve to be at number 22, but is going to climb into potentially the top 15, at least 17 or 18 over the next few weeks. But they don't deserve to be in the top 25 either.
Yeah, I don't know how North Carolina is over Duke. Like, I get it. Like, it's crazy because like everyone was high on Clemson. Literally everyone was like, except for me and then people who watch football. They're like, Clemson, they're gonna win the ACC. They're gonna make the playoffs. They're like, we're not sure about Florida State. It's gonna be Florida State, Clemson. Clemson loses, and now Clemson, I don't think is in the top 25 anymore.
They're not.
They're the next team out.
26,
but
yeah.
Duke, who beat Clemson, isn't. Like, they literally in one game destroyed everything everyone thought about Clemson this year, and they're ahead of North Carolina. They're behind North Carolina that almost lost to App
UNC
State.
Maybe should have lost to Appalachian State.
One could say that.
it was, and again, it's a double overtime game, so they could have lost. Yeah, that one's weird, but I guess it's close enough there with what we're seeing from the few teams there. And then I don't know if I understand Colorado moving up 4 slots. Listen, I get it that the final score is 36-14, but the first half of that game, I hate using. I'm going to say was competitive, but it's because both teams were not good. We had a lot of hype from Colorado from the first week against TCU, and I think a lot of people were bored with what they were seeing in the first quarter of that game, when it was 0-0 after one quarter, from Colorado not kind of following through on what people had hoped they would see.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Nebraska showed the way to beat Colorado. Nebraska's has a quarterback not good. That has 6 turnovers in 6 quarters. So that's why they didn't beat Colorado. Their quarterback's awful. Bama should not be number 10. LSU should not be 14. They should be ahead of Bama at the very least, because they lost to a much better team. Texas, where did Texas go? Texas went all the way to 4. That's crazy. Where's Florida State? Florida State's 3. I get like, and here's the thing.
Florida State goes against there because they're not going down anytime soon.
Yeah, this goes against, like, technically, based on what we said last week in my general thought, Texas and Florida should be 1 and 2 because they have the 2 biggest wins of the season. But I know that that's not how they do the poll, and how they currently do the poll, it doesn't make any sense for them to be this high. So, whatever. Notre Dame is 9. That's fair for what they've done so far. That'll be handled with a win or a loss against Ohio State. Outside of that, I don't have too many complaints. I just think it's weird. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, like Texas, Florida State get put up to the top because of their wins. Duke just is lucky to be there because of their win. They literally knocked the team out the top 25. Colorado is at 18, and Duke has a more impressive win than them, and so do some other people.
I could see Michigan higher, and I could see Kansas State lower. Kind of ones I'm just kind of how I think they eventually wash out. But yeah, I mean, again, it's early. And I don't
Me
know what
too.
Tennessee is yet either. I
They
no
didn't look
idea.
that good.
Yeah, and I mean, again, Tennessee, that's a number 11 team. So, again, I get it. LSU lost a terrible game to start the year, and then they, just beat up on a Grambling team. They scored 10 straight touchdowns to start the game. Defense still had some problems, even though we only gave up 10 points. But
Yeah.
I just see LSU being better than Alabama and Tennessee when they get on the field at the same time. They're just on talent wise.
I mean, I could still see LSU and Georgia in the championship game.
I still can too. There's a path to that. LSU's got some things they got to figure out. They got to get a pass rush. They got to figure out who their starting cornerbacks are. Maybe
they also need to let Harold Perkins be Harold Perkins,
and they did this last week.
Okay,
They're yes, he has been moved back to outside linebacker. He is not an inside linebacker. They've admitted that was a mistake. So
I'm glad they
happened
righted
to
the
me.
shit.
It was a
it only
1
cost
week.
them losing.
They listened to us. I guess Brian Kelly was listening to the show. So
Yeah.
you're welcome. You're welcome, Coach Kelly.
Yeah, good job. You're not always the smartest person in the room. Okay, so let's go down this watch list of games that we're going to be forced to watch, and I'm going to try to tell you why you should watch them, even though you shouldn't. Penn State, Illinois. I don't remember why I put this one on here. You shouldn't watch this game. No, okay, I know why you should watch this game. Illinois has
there's
a really
nothing
good,
else.
well, yes, largely Illinois has a really good defensive line, and I'm interested to see Penn State's running game go against that defensive line. And anything when you have a new quarterback and the level of difficulty goes up a little bit, it's always interesting. So I'm interested. This is going to be Drew Aller's toughest game so far. Georgia Southern at Wisconsin. Georgia Southern's 2-0. They put up 35 points plus in each of their games, and I just want to see how Wisconsin bounces back. Like this game is gonna tell us what Wisconsin is gonna be. Do they kind of pout and cry and almost lose to Georgia Southern or lose, or do they go out and remember that they're a Big Ten program that actually does have some level of talent and kind of end this one early? So that is not a good game to watch, but it is a game to watch with some sort of story if you care about that at all. Kansas State and Missouri. I just want to see how long this goes on with the SEC. And this is a game that Kansas State was probably favored in regardless, so it probably really doesn't matter. It's just gonna, make it another loss that the SEC has to stomach against another team. And similar to Illinois losing to Kansas, it's like it's gonna take like 6 years for people to remember that Kansas State isn't the Kansas State of the last 5 or so years. So it's gonna look bad, even though it's Missouri, and even though I think their states border each other are very close. That's the noon window. Afternoon window, South Carolina at Georgia. This game is not interesting at all. It's just the best game that Georgia's going to play until like week 11 because their schedule is Charmin soft.
Garbage. Yeah.
Alabama.
Do you like the LSU Mississippi State lineup at all? Mississippi State is 2-0. They've played garbage teams and probably don't deserve to be 2-0, but at least it gives us an opportunity to see if LSU is headed in the right direction versus a better team than Grambling.
I think you just made the case as why it should be on this list. It's not because it's an interesting game. It's just like all of these.
All of these are because we're trying to see what one team is for some future matchup, not because of this week.
Like it is a game. So yeah, I would like to see LSU dominate that game. I'd like to see them do that because that's the LSU that we expected to come in the season, and this is technically an SEC opponent. Technically, I like to see like 24 points, like win by like 21 or cover whatever the spread is.
9.5. It's 9.5.
That's a terrible spread.
They got to double that.
More than the spread.
That's a low spread.
Double the spread. 18 points. Win by 18. At least 17.
Is Wyoming going to give Texas a game?
See, I almost put that on there. I feel like I would not be surprised if Texas loses that game.
Well, Texas is favored by 28.5, and I think that's insane. I don't know if Wyoming's like gonna win, but 28.5 is insane.
Yeah,
it's one of the
I don't believe that one. That's one of those ones where it's like it's early, and so they just like man, they are overrating Texas because they beat Alabama.
Yep.
Whatever. Alabama at UCF. UCF is competent. I don't know that they're good, but they're competent. And I want to see if Alabama is able.
USF.
Did I get this wrong?
You said UCF.
Oh, did I put the wrong game? They play because there's a USF and a UCF, I
Yeah, it's
think.
USF, South Florida.
Okay. I don't remember much about that team. I'm thinking of someone else then, clearly. Alabama USF. My only thing is like, can Alabama come out, beat them by 4 touchdowns, and like convince
Favored by
people?
32.
Can they
5
cover?
touchdowns.
They should cover, but can they cover? Like, again, it's not really an interesting game, but like the Alabama of old that had a bad game, they haven't really
They
lost,
would
but had a
rebound.
bad game. The rebound, like you would just hate to be that next team.
Yep.
And if they don't beat them by like 40, and like Jalen, like I want to see week 1 where like Jalen Railroad ran for like 150 yards and threw for like 300 and people thought he was good. He's not, but like that's what I'd like to see. Or there's like, I don't believe a Nick Saban program can pout. Like I just don't see that, but I would like to see how they recover because they haven't lost a game like this in forever.
My one that kind of sends out is interesting, that where if I'm just on if there was an upset watch that wasn't just upset because they didn't cover. I don't think Florida is good, but I said earlier that I don't think Tennessee is a number 11 team. There's things that can happen in that game that let Florida upset Tennessee in that game. There's a couple of plays, 1 or 2 plays going a weird way, and Florida getting some advantage from the home crowd, and that game ends up being a bit looking like a big upset from a number 11 team losing to an unranked team.
And I almost made that my game of the week, but I thought it was disrespectful to pick a game of the week out of this slate.
Yeah, I
so
wouldn't
I just
either.
didn't.
It's my one that I'm like, okay, this is my up. If I had to pick an upset watch,
I would
that
be
one there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Florida over Tennessee on the upset watch. To get to the other guys, as a faithful, not really faithful, but as a West Virginia graduate, I have some semblance of care about that program, even though they need to fire their coach. But Pitt is also doing like the worst thing possible, which is like we were good at something and the head coach didn't like it. So he's changing everything so that they can be bad again, which is just so smart. So, but the backyard brawl is a rivalry that we haven't got in a long time, despite the fact that these schools are literally an hour and 15 minutes away from each other. And I can't wait till West Virginia's back in the ACC so we get this all the time. So this is a game that I'll be watching. And if any of my friends are listening to this, you were all supposed to give me tickets and you didn't. And I hate all of you because I wanted to go to this game. But supposedly they're selling the tickets for a ridiculous number.
Yeah, I think West Virginia. I think West Virginia wins that game,
which would not be great for Pitt, but West Virginia looked a little bit more competent than expected.
It's weird that that's a nationally televised game, though. That just shows you what this week's got going on.
I mean,
that's a nationally televised ABC game.
It was a great game last year, and it is still a rivalry that we haven't gotten in a while. I think this is one of those games that's nationally televised for every reason besides the actual product on the field, and I'm okay with that because this is a legitimate.
Sometimes you got to fill that TV schedule.
Yeah, like this is a legitimate hated rivalry. Like people in West Virginia are already talking about like the parties that they're going to throw, that they might burn some couches and stuff like that. A West Virginia staple if they win this game in West Virginia. So it matters of sort. It just doesn't matter for the viewing public per se. If you don't have an interest or if you don't care like about heated rivalries, like if you can just sit and watch any game. Did we miss anything? Is there anything you want to go over before we get to our?
No, we actually probably the opposite. We probably talked about too many things that don't actually matter and aren't that interesting. Versus missing stuff. I think we probably forced a few things to sound interesting.
Yeah. This is our 3rd episode. Our first 2 were much better, but this is what you get. When
so was the first 2 episodes of the NCAA season.
Yeah, the TV product much better. Okay, so 2 Ohio State legends, Nick Bosa and Joe Burrow, just got new contracts in the NFL. Bosa, 5 years, $170 million. This is my pit stop, by the way, as we end the show. Bosa, 5 years, $170 million with $122 million guaranteed, and a $50 million signing bonus, $34 million a year. He is the highest paid non-quarterback ever, and a lot of people were surprised in this, and that if the jump is so much higher than the next guy, right? Like typically when you get these contracts, if a dude makes 30, the next guy gets 30 and a half, and the next guy gets 31, and the next guy gets 31 and a half. He like got like 2 or 3 million more than the next guy. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Aaron Donald or one of the defensive guys. But this is what happens when you, one, are related to the Chicago Mafia, and two, your brother and family are already rich. So you don't need to play. Like, you don't need the money like other people do. You can just sit down and wait for them to pay you. And he got paid. So shout out to OSU legend Nick Bosa. And shout out to other OSU legend who we allowed LSU to borrow for a year or two. Joe Burrow, I swear this contract is getting paid with Cincinnati city taxes. Like property taxes is going to go up. 5 years, $275 million with $219 million guaranteed. $40 million signing bonus, $55 million a year. I'm sure there's no regrets of the contract, but he looked like he had maybe been partying before he played the Browns. Not the Joe Burrow that we've seen, not the Joe Burrow that won LSU a national championship or took Cincinnati to the Super Bowl. But I imagine that that's a 1 week thing.
Yeah, I agree. My final pit stop was that LSU legend and champion Joe Burrow signed a 5-year, $275 million deal, eclipsing the deal that Herbert got from the Chargers. And I just want to I know that Joe Burrow still wears an LSU bracelet on his wrist for every game because it's a university and a state that saw his greatness and gave him the opportunity to share his gift with the world. So I know he thanks LSU because LSU led to him getting picked number 1 and getting this contract. And thank you, Joe.
Yeah, sure. It's cool. We let you borrow him, and then
it's
he
nice
came
to have
back
an eye
to
for talent.
Then he came back to the great state of Ohio, where he belongs, down the street from where he grew up. Still hangs out with all his OSU guys. Nick Bosa is his best friend. Actually, share the same agent. So OSU legend, and LSU resident
champion.
Yeah, okay, we'll give him champion. He did
forever champion
there. Forever champion. So yeah, that's the show. Hopefully you guys stuck around for this. We did force some things, but
sometimes
we're here. Yeah, we're here. It'll be much better because there are for sure good games every week after this.
Yes.
Like this is shockingly the only really bad week. So as always, you can follow me on Twitter at JordanW330. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Power2 Podcast. Wesley, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at WhoDatWesley13, and I'm also doing a Saints podcast for at Dome Patrol PCast.
Perfect. Listen, like, subscribe, follow, share the podcast, watch the podcast on YouTube, listen to the other podcasts in the Fans First Sports Network college feed. And if you have an NFL team, there is a podcast for all 32 teams, including the Saints podcast that Wesley hosts. So check it out. We'll see you next week.